takes years to build, but in a flash, it can all be gone. At 1:14 a.m., the National Weather Service issued a life-threatening flash flood warning, but no one expected the severity of the event that ensued. Over 100 people died, with the death toll still being worked on as of the moment of recording this video, but in moments like these, people need someone or something to blame. Maybe it was the understaffed NWS's late response. Maybe they didn't acknowledge the severity of the event properly. Maybe it was the people in charge wherever that didn't acknowledge the severity properly. Or maybe it was just faulty equipment. With this video, I want to properly lay out what happened, but more so I want to focus on the future of floods and what some of you might be able to do to prevent the worst from happening again. Flash Flood Valley is a region in Texas that includes Guadalupe and Colorado rivers, and it is regarded the third most dangerous place to be in regards to flash floods. Due to its climate and the unique geological and topological features, it is extremely prone to flooding. The valley lays on top of very dry rock called karst, and against common sense, dry soil has a very hard time absorbing water. That's because water, when it goes above the ground, it has the surface tension, which kind of makes it hard to break into any cracks that there might be inside of the soil. But when we have small droplets of water in soil, which make the soil wet, when the water goes on top of it, it is attracted to those droplets and it connects to them, and then it has an easier time going down the soil. In a roundabout way, it's the phenomena that you've seen probably many times when someone places an object on top of water and it stays afloat because, well, it can't break through the surface tension of the water, and you have this little bulge that prevents it from spilling over. Adding to that the already irregular rainfall pattern and the valley topology, it all makes a place that is extremely prone to flooding. But what makes the Flash Flood Valley and what gives it the name is its extreme disastrous history of many floods. Talking about the entire history of Flash Flood Valley would have taken days, as there were a lot of very extreme events. So to give you a good overview, I will talk about the September 1921 San Antonio flood. At the time, the Gulf of Mexico was experiencing a hurricane season, and soon a tropical cyclone formed and made landfall in Tampico, Mexico. The storm carried record rainfall and quickly entered the United States, making its way over the Flash Flood Valley. It peaked in central Texas near San Antonio, and the worst disaster to ever hit the region has ensued. 215 people lost their lives to those floods, and to this day it stands as one of the deadliest floods in American history. But even though people remember and know what can happen, the precautions aren't properly taken. Years pass and people don't forget, but they move on, and lessons that should have been taken by the government are brushed to the side in the name of development and progress of the region. So let's go over it. What lessons should have been taken? I wanted to make this section about different solutions and infrastructure that we can make to mitigate and prevent floods. But that's very technical and I want to stay in the range relevant to your life. So I think this is it. The 2024 State Flood Plan developed by Texas Water Development Board is a blueprint for what the state should do to achieve those goals. The recommendation is a $56 billion investment over 30 years to the entire region, which would include education, research, and infrastructure, making sure that people know how to react, we have the right knowledge to prevent and mitigate these things and react appropriately, and we have the right tools to do so. Well, this would include new meters and levees and flood walls, greener infrastructure, many things that would make sure that we are prepared. And very importantly, San Antonio and Guadalupe regions only need a $2 billion investment to prevent this disaster that has happened recently. So, according to the people that have spent their entire lives researching soil, groundwater, water in general, and floods, how they work, this is all that is needed for the entire Texas region to be safe. But most importantly, the San Antonio and Guadalupe regions, there shouldn't be any discussion here because there are countless lives to be saved. Have in mind that the people who develop this stuff, they are environmental engineers and geologists who could have gone into much more profitable industries, but they want to follow their passion, and their passion is to make sure that people are safer. There isn't any monetary motivation here, which is why I believe their intentions are genuine, and this is truthfully a good blueprint. All of these are calculated with a cost-benefit ratio, and keep in mind, in this recent flash flood, the losses to the people were $20 billion. This means all of the houses, the infrastructure lost, this could be prevented with just a $2 billion investment. And, well, that's money coming from the government to protect the people and their livelihoods, which is much more important. And here is a piece of good information as, well, this plan has been in the works for a while now, and lawmakers have been trying to push it through and give it the proper funding. But it's appearing on the ballot on November 4th, so if by some miracle you are from Texas, on the November 4th ballot you will have the proposition number 4, which says the constitutional amendment to dedicate a portion of the revenue derived from the state's sales and use taxes to the Texas Water Fund and to provide for the allocation and use of that revenue. This is the proposition that specifically gives funding to the state flood plan, and it would ensure that the state has proper funding to prevent these disasters from happening in the future. So when the opportunity comes, remember to try and push this life-saving science into motion. But, well, it needs to pass a lot of political hoops, and in the current climate, it's kind of hard. So let's talk about what's going on right now, and what trajectory are we taking. So, as you possibly heard, there's a lot of finger pointing at the big beautiful bill and the recent funding cuts for the very late response of the NWS and their late emergency warning on July 4th. Well, I don't want to engage in partisan politics, so let's walk through it step by step. What happened during that night? As the National Weather Service monitors the possibility of an extreme weather event, they rely on data from various stations placed around the region. From that, they make a prediction, judging whether it's just some rain forming or a life-threatening flood. These data points are mostly automated, so the management of the event isn't that hard at the moment. As NWS said on their behalf, their response was as timely as possible. But people died, with the biggest controversy being the very late evacuation of Camp Mystic, where 27 kids and counselors lost their lives. Although the warning was sent at 1:13, the camp started evacuation at 2:30, and, well, the investigation of who's to blame is still pending. I think it's an echo of the larger issue. The problem is that NWS should have known sooner whether the event is deadly or not, but they had inconclusive data, the weather was predicted wrong, which meant that although the response is true to the data, it was inappropriate to the reality of the situation. It took an hour to evacuate the camp, and that was already enough to make the event deadly. This shouldn't have happened, and we shouldn't expect everyone to act perfectly appropriately. They should have been better prepared. You have to understand that the few people at NWS hold a red button that when pushed will send entire county into chaos. And this on its own can create more loss of lives. When people get stuck in low water crossings, they need to be sure that when they push this button, they save more lives than they endanger. The issue doesn't lie in the poor staffing of these stations, or the poor reaction to warnings given, or the lack of expertise. It lies in the current lack of science and infrastructure for the appropriate prediction of weather. This tragedy is not made by people in the now, but rather decades of poor government action. And the problem is that we are witnessing right now another poor government reaction. The Big Beautiful Bill eliminates the Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research, which is the agency responsible for creating the science needed for these predictions to be appropriate. We are already giving very little funding to the science that is life-saving, and this bill kills whatever projects that do exist. To quote a CAP article on the Chopping blog, are promising research to operations efforts, as well as the National Severe Storms Laboratory, the Forecasting a Continuum of our Environmental Threats Framework, the Warn on Forecast project, and the Flooded Locations and Simulated Hydrographs project, which improves warning systems for flash floods. Additionally, NOAA's 2020-2030 Precipitation Prediction Grand Challenge effort, which seeks to enhance precipitation prediction by improving our understanding of physical processes, exploiting observations, and improving forecast models and products, will falter without the continued investment. The Big Beautiful Bill kills any efforts trying to make these predictions accurate, and it near ensures that this disaster will happen again, and the poor government action will continue. So to sum it up, to prevent floods, the state needs a lot more funding, which would not only save lives, but also prevent the loss of infrastructure, which destroys the lives of the living. So far, instead of that, the little research that was going on has been gutted. But there is a potentially good future ahead. If people participate in the referendum, if they vote for the right proposition, and if the government allows the funding to pass, Texas will turn from the biggest flood victim to a science and research powerhouse. But if nothing gets done, what does the future hold? So the future of floods is most importantly connected to climate change, and one of the issues you probably already heard about, and that's the rising sea levels. What I prefer to mention and is less known is that the climate in general becomes much more irregular. With climate change, weather has become much more unpredictable and extreme. When it doesn't rain for much longer and you have a drought. And on the other hand, when it finally does rain, instead of regular rainfall, you have a flood. It's a continuous cycle that makes soil less permeable and makes floods even more devastating. This all seems pretty gloom, but as always, I try to motivate you to channel that energy into action. So, let's talk about that. What should you do? And this is finally a breath of fresh air, because we have a lot of things that we can do. First, most importantly, if you can, donate to the relief fund. There are people struggling right now. Second, if you live in Texas or if you know someone who lives in Texas, remember that on the November 4th, you will have a proposition number 4, which promotes the funding for the infrastructure and science that will prevent these floods in the future. Third, and the most general, remember to look around you and support the science of sustainability. This happens most importantly through your purchases. And many will say that your lifestyle and personal responsibility matters, but it's not specifically about every everyday choice. It's about who you support. While your lifestyle matters and you should recycle, supporting the right businesses ensures that the people who want to build the knowledge and science for the clean earth have the right funding to do so. Me personally, I focus on one area, that is fashion. So, if you want to support the businesses that make fashion better for the climate, check out my shop, mentrop.com. If you purchase anything, know that you are supporting me on my mission to market the science of sustainability. And without this support, these businesses will never be able to truly change the world. While with it, they just might. So thank you for watching, and remember that there's a lot of things that you can do to prevent further climate change, and that you have the impact on this world.